Good morning and welcome to another Tuesday. It's a lovely Tuesday outside today, as it was in fact last week with the weather. But anyway, Gemma is going to do our reading this morning, and it's coming from Luke chapter 23.
Luke 23 verses 26 to 31. As the soldiers led him away, they seized Simon from Cyrene, who was on his way from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A large number of people followed him, including women who mourned and wailed for him. Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For the time will come when you will say, 'Blessed are the childless women, the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and then to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if people do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry?"
And so yesterday at our prayer meeting we discussed the passage that comes just before this about Jesus' trial. And the thing that really sort of struck all of us was just how unfair, how shocking it was with the mob mentality of the crowd, of them all sort of shouting to crucify Jesus. And it's just shocking, really, when you read it, just how unfair and how ridiculous it seems now. And then this passage, we think sort of the shock calms down a bit, but actually, after digging a little deeper, we realised it's possibly more shocking. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about this passage and about Jesus just before the crucifixion.
So it was customary for the person condemned to death to carry their own cross to the execution site, but that would weigh more than any man could ever carry. So usually they just carry the crossbeam, which would still weigh more than two very full suitcases. It was also part of the law that Roman soldiers could compel someone else in the crowd to carry the crossbeam if the person sentenced couldn't carry it for themselves. So in verse 26, Simon of Cyrene was seized or grabbed or ordered or made to carry the crossbeam for Jesus. And this shows just actually how much Jesus suffered before he even got to the cross. He was flogged viciously with whips that had hard, sharp metal spikes tied onto the leather. And this was designed to cause maximum pain and blood loss and the tearing of flesh without killing them. Jesus also had a crown of thorns that weren't just placed but forced on his head. And Jesus would have been so weak from the pain, the blood loss and the wounds that he needed the help of Simon. But we just can't imagine God ever needing help.
And yet we read in verse 28, with all these wounds and all this suffering, that Jesus still has the time and still has compassion for the women of Jerusalem. If there's ever a time to focus on yourself, you think that will be about right. With all that's going on around you, all that you could focus on would just be yourself and your own sufferings, really. But Jesus here spends the time talking to these women as he's just more concerned about their future and what lies ahead of them rather than the cross which lies in front of him. And so the accounts of Jesus' crucifixion are completely and utterly shocking. They're probably more so than we can ever write about or imagine. And while I was at uni during a worship session, we were singing "Oh Praise the Name," and this picture just came to me. We're singing about Jesus and God, and we often picture him as being sort of huge, mighty, powerful, with a big sort of halo and lights behind them and all this sort of glory. And I just had this picture of Jesus in his lovely white robes, but they were torn. They had blood stains on them. There was blood dripping all down his face, all down his shoulders and his back. He had the crown of thorns and he was cowering in a corner. And I don't know exactly how theologically accurate it is or anything, but it was just so visual, so shocking to me. That actually the God that we worship, Jesus, who we often see in all of his glory in church paintings and stained glass windows, actually was there in the corner, suffering, cowering away. And this really graphic image of Jesus, actually he would have been suffering, he'd have been extremely painful, all of this would have happened. Yet he still has the compassion for each and every one of us to talk to us and talk to the women of Jerusalem in their time of need. And so even though Jesus was completely and utterly destroyed and looked the way no human should ever have to look, he still made time for them. He still was concerned about what lay ahead for them rather than his own suffering. So it's a pretty graphic reading. It's not especially light-hearted. But we were really just struck by it this morning as we read the passage. and I'd encourage you to dig into it as well, as we have.
Yeah.
So those are our brief thoughts. Have a wonderful day.
And we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week. Yeah.
Bye.
Super. Bye.